Our fourth budget work session. If folks could take their seats. Thank you, everyone, for joining tonight. I'm going to turn us right over to city staff.
Thank you, Mayor. City Council, Daniel Mears, Acting City Manager. Where we had left off after Monday night's discussion, we were talking through a number of different proposals for a reduction of cost as well as increases to some revenue, and we have an update for you this evening in regards to what we were discussing on Monday night. So what we wanted to do, we've got a little color-coded sheet for the items that were left unresolved and wanted to run through those. So essentially everything that you have in green were the items that were accepted by the council for some additional revenue and or some reduction of cost. So if you move on to the second page where we're at with personnel, you'll come to a color blue. That was an unresolved item. We did not make a final decision in regards to that, associated with a position and a potential savings of $57,420. There was not any action for staff associated with that. I think the council wanted to mull it over. So we can either discuss that now or if you want to hold it till a little later point.
So colleagues, this is on the second page of the handout. There is a .8 full-time employee, Senior Center Services Information and Referral Specialist. We held this one last time because I think we wanted a little bit more information. We did get some feedback from the public that there's a lot of face-to-face interaction with this particular FTE. Staff, was there a particular reason this one was offered up?
I think it was offered because the duties and responsibilities can be absorbed overall in the rest of the organization. So
Understood.
The staff was putting together some examples for you for we could begin discussion in regards to where some personnel reductions could come about. And so that one was offered for discussion.
Understood. Do any of my colleagues have any thoughts on this particular .8 FTE?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Ndebumadu.
Thank you so much. Just a general overall thought. Thank you for convening the session. General overall thought is I just want to make sure we don't spend another length of hours going through these structural line by line kind of smaller number cuts when we're still 16 point something odd $1 million away. I'm not saying that we need to make $16 million worth of cuts, but what I'm saying is we're still to some degree not making a meaningful dent. So I don't want to spend the hours of this conversation and the structure going through line items that are to the tune of 50,000, 200,000, 100,000 here and there when we need to probably be having a broader discussion. So we can do both of those in this evening without being here for 7 hours. That's great, but I just want to raise that before we go forward.
Thank you very much. Any of my other colleagues have any thoughts? Okay. I'm prepared to accept staff recommendation unless there's any additional comment from anyone. Nope. Okay. We'll accept recommendation. Thank you, staff.
All right, very good. So also in that section, you will see we have one that was not accepted in red, and then in your dark green, there was a modification to the number. So just to work through the color coding. The next blue item that we had was associated under services, and this was the item with bulk trash pickup. So the council had asked for staff to do another reach out in regards to the folks that we were looking to have response with that, and the stars aligned. We actually had a few folks respond positively to that reach out. We were recommending the removal of this item because we had not gotten a favorable response from the affected communities. I think from a staff perspective, there are enough communities that have responded favorably. It is within the council's discretion if you would like to continue with that expense and we can get started with it, or if you'd like it removed.
Sorry, Dr. Ahn, did you have anything to add on this particular one?
No, Mr. Mayor. As Mr. Mears shared with you, so far 5 communities are confirmed, 2 declined, and 3 expressed the interest. So we have more than 2 communities to for contractors to begin. So we are waiting for your guidance.
Understood. Do any of my colleagues have any thoughts on this particular one? I know this is your district, Councilmember Truesdale.
Thank you, Mayor. I did reach out to some of my constituents and, in fact, shared some information with staff in reference to continuing this item, and I think it's something that's well needed. Our taxpayers, they really deserve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'll just go one by one. Councilmember Brady, any thoughts? No? Councilmember Rogers? No. Good to go. Councilmember Ndebumadu? Okay. Mayor Pro Tem? No? Okay. Recommendation from Councilmember Truesdale is to retain. I'm fine with that recommendation. Do we have a general consensus on that? I'm seeing nods of agreement. All right. That one remains. Thank you, staff.
All right, the next one will be quick. This was associated with printing. The council had expressed not to remove the entire amount. We're going back. We are going to reduce that line, but we're going to retain $6,000 in there to make sure that we address the hard copy needs of the organization.
6 is way better than 23,000. Oh, Councilman Brady, I'm sorry.
Which item were you talking about?
This is on, I believe, page 3.
4.
This is or page 4, the printing and binding budget books, ACFR. So this is the one where we had some discussion about retaining the some of the books, but getting rid of those that might not be necessary. Any thoughts from any of my colleagues on this one?
Mr. Mayor, just clarification. So we're going from, on the binding of the budget books, we're going from the 23,300 and we reduced it by the 6,000? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, we're going to reduce by 17,300 and keep 6,000.
And keep the 6,000? Okay, thank you.
So reducing by 17.3 and keeping 6, for those who didn't hear. Any other questions or thoughts on this one, colleagues? Seeing head shakes, okay. General consensus for the change. Seeing nods. All good? All right. Thank you, staff, for the recommendation.
All right, so the last item from Monday night, this will actually fill 2 levels of discussion that we had from Monday. One was in regards to the LED lighting replacement. Staff had made a recommendation to not spend $250,000 replacing LED lights for the council's consideration, and there was a lot of concern associated with that, and a lot of discussion about the value of the city's street lights. The other element that is wrapped into this is there was a request for the staff to take a look at opportunities for borrowing. How could we look at using debt to our advantage from a cash flow standpoint or other method? So Mr. Miller worked with Dr. on an analysis, so to speak, in regards to our lighting program to convert that from something that is a maintenance type project to one that is more of a capital project, looking at it more holistically. Mr. Miller, would you like to sort of summarize where you ended up?
All right, thank you very, very much. As Mr. Mears noted, we did analysis, spoke with Dr. Ott, and we came up with a concept. So we looked at the total ongoing costs, if you will, of approximately $2.5 million for an indefinite period of time. And I asked Dr. Hahn to estimate what it would cost to do everything up front, a one-time type transaction, and include the $250,000 per year for the LED lighting, because from a bond perspective, we could combine those two. So the cable replacement is approximately $13 million, and then the LED lighting came out to about $2.7 million, and that's equal to 4,500 poles at $600 per LED light. So rough numbers, $16 million total cost to do a one-time CIP project. The one thing that Dr. Ahn brought forward was, shoot, it might be costing us $2.5 million a year right now, but because of inflationary pressures, especially with the cost of copper, that could escalate at a pretty quick clip. Just to throw it in, I didn't get overly aggressive with the inflation factor, but I put a 3% escalator in per year. I think that was a pretty conservative number. So getting down to the nuts and bolts, what we did is we put that $16 million total into two projections. One was a level payment note, level payment amortization over 20 years. The reason I use 20 years is because that's the short end of the useful life. We probably could go longer, but I didn't want to push out the debt any more than 20 years. On that, we could always, if this is something that the council would want to do, and the note was implemented, we could always do a restructuring further down the road to reduce that payment cycle from 20 years down to something shorter if it was the desire after getting back on the feet, if you will. So that being said, a level payment and a level principal payment. Just real quickly, the difference between that, a level payment is like your mortgage or a loan on a car. It's the exact same amount every payment. A level principal is you're paying down the principal at equal increment. So the impact is that you're paying down the note much quicker, so therefore over the life of the loan, the interest is less and the total payments are less. The downside to a level principal payment is that the upfront cost, let's say, first 1/3 of the note is more expensive. That all being said, the interest rate I assumed was 5%. I talked to bond counsel today, and they said the 5% was reasonable. So we stayed with that. So all this, I also put a sinking fund in, where we could build up a reserve, $100,000 year one, increasing that by $100,000 each year until you got to year 5, $500,000 a year after that. So you would have some flexibility in your budget to do any type of repairs. That would accumulate to about $9 million if no expenditures were made out of it. But again, it would be a nice cushion as the city moved forward to dip in if need be, okay? If no expenditures were made and after 20 years, you would have $9 million in the pot for another capitalization. So that's a variable that you could, decide if it's short, if you want to put more. So when comparing the cash flows between the current pay-go model and the level payment option, year one savings equal $1.1 million. All right, that's actually a little bit more because I didn't put the $250,000 for the LED. I put it into the note, but I didn't use it for this. The other thing is, because of the compounding of the future prices, right, or potential prices, if you compound $2.5 million a year out for 20 years, that grows by about $15 million. It's amazing how quickly the compounding will increase. So that savings, that pay-go to debt, savings does not include that, okay? It does not recognize the inflationary costs. So just by taking the pay-go amount minus the annual debt service, minus the contribution to the sinking fund, you're coming out ahead by that amount of money. Now, doing the same analysis on the level principal payment, because the upfront cost, because the the interest is higher in the beginning years, that drops down to $810,000 of year one of savings. But on the long term, you're going up to $16 million on the overall, so $15 million compared to 16 between the two amortization models. The one thing I want to emphasize is that if that $2.5 million is abbreviated, so let's say we can do everything within 15 years or 12 years or whatever, it's going to change the cash flow analysis, okay? Because we're assuming it's $2.5 million every year. The reality, that 2.5 is going to increase, but by what increment? So these are the variations and the variables that we have to work through a little bit. But if you just look at it on a structural comparison, where we are today versus doing the debt model, you can see that you're going to accrue definite savings over that life of that loan. So my recommendation is to consider it that much more. We don't have to do anything tonight per se, but I would definitely encourage continue analysis, especially on Dr. Jan's part relative to how much are we really going to invest of that 2.5 every single year. Is it 12 years? Is it 15 years? Is it indefinite? Because that's going to have a driver on the overall analysis. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Miller. This was responsive to a specific request that two of my colleagues had, and I know Councilmember Ndibu Madu had also previously raised a broader conversation about kind of pay-go versus what we could do on the debt front. So I really appreciate the suggestion on this particular one.
Sure.
Any other thoughts from staff on this particular proposal before I turn it over to my colleagues?
Just had one comment. Dr. Ahn looked at the level of LED upgrades that we have through the community, and he wanted to share how much we have complete citywide.
So last time, one of the questions from the council was what was the percentage of LED replacement in the city. So the exact number is 34%. As of now. Number will be slightly higher by the end of this fiscal year because we have a couple more projects pending. But if I were to give you district by district breakdown, District 1, 616 out of 1371, that equates about 45%. District 2, 493 upgrades out of 1754, that equates to be about 28%. District 3, 619 out of 1582 streetlights, that's 39%. And District 4, 427 out of 1649 streetlights, that's about 26%. And citywide, we've replaced 2,155 out of 6,356, that's 34%.
Thank you, Dr. Ahn.
And that's all we have. So
Thank you, staff. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues if they have any questions on this particular proposal. I'll start with Councilmember at-large Dennis Brady.
Thank you. Appreciate this effort and quick turnaround. So from reading this, it's recommended that we do go to the bond market to do at least these two items. Is that correct? Is that what I'm understanding from staff?
It is, yes. I think the cash flows, are such that it's definitely worth pursuing. I don't know if you want to go to the bond market or do a negotiated deal with a bank. Right now, I would recommend a negotiated deal. But yes, to the market. And there are expenditures, just on the the enterprise fund CIP, that will probably be a borrowing also.
Okay. Are there opportunities to add other items in if we do this kind of package them?
Oh,
'Cause
sure. Yes,
I
sir.
see 6 items on the CIP page that total about $750,000 that are expenditures in this coming year that at the senior center and other places that could be added to that and take advantage of a similar thing, because that $775,000 would then not be part of this year's budget configuration per se. So I would, if my colleagues go this route, which I don't see as a bad idea, I think we ought to maximize our opportunity. But before we go down that road, I do have a question. Taking on additional debt in light of the tight budget that we have, is there a possibility that it could damage our credit rating?
Again, my advice is, or statement is, as long as the community has a plan, okay, you're going to be all right. You have relied on PAYGO arguably to more than you ought to have, right? Because you're pulling down fund balances. I would say that your fund balance is a bigger issue than going out to the bond market for a CIP. You're not going to the bond market for CIP for any out of the ordinary type projects. You're not going out for for operating costs and that type of thing. You're still being very, very conservative relative to what you're using bond proceeds for. So, I can't speak to New York for New York. Because they always throw a curveball, it seems like. But from a practical perspective, what you are doing is very, very conservative, and you can support those actions very easily.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question goes to Dr. Ang. With regards to the cable replacement, are we talking about a project that will replace all of the cables for all of the streetlights that the City of Bowie owns?
For streetlights, yes, to all those streetlights city owns and maintains.
Right.
Cables are limited to Levitt community, because
Okay,
those are much
so
older.
the cable replacement is in the center part of the city, the 11th part of the city, correct?
Yes, sir. And those are also cables that most of the cables the city owns and maintains.
Right. Well, the reason for that question is the way it's structured, we tap into, or BG&E provides the electricity for the lights unmetered. And we have periodically negotiated a rate that we pay per light. And it doesn't matter whether the light is burning or not, whether it's broken, whether it's even there. If we've got 500 lights on our poles, then we're paying 500 times that set rate. Is there any possibility that we could look to attempt to meter the lights so we actually pay for the true cost of electricity, not what is negotiated through the Public Service Commission? So I just want to throw that out there as a possibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. And I also completely agree with Council Member Brady's point about potentially adding some additional CIPs in there with that particular negotiated loan. To Director Miller's point and Councilman Brady's question, I think it would make the most sense to do a negotiated bank loan and avoid going to market for the time being. So I just want to offer that. But I strongly appreciate the suggestion, Council Member. Council Member Truesdale, anything on this particular proposal? Good on this one? Council Member Rogers?
I agree with you and with Councilman Brady. I think this is a great strategy. It's interesting that you said that the city relied too much on PAYGO and probably should have had more, I guess, a more breadth of a strategy around how we move forward with financing. So thank you. I think this document is very good. So thank you very much.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. Miller, thank you very much. This is a excellent product here, and I think opens up a whole new opportunity for us here. I mean, it looks like, as you say, it's $1 million a year savings or so, and I would assume that that excludes savings that we would also get for rate savings that we would save on the LED lights, because the LED lights have a cheaper rate. So I assume that you did not include that?
That's correct. I didn't even factor that in.
Yeah.
Right.
So there, that coupled with the additional $250,000 that you also, I mean, you went as conservative as you could go, and it still ends up a big winner. So I imagine it's probably going to be in the neighborhood of 1.5 million savings a year, and I think that's an excellent opportunity. And I thank you very much for responding to inquiries that we had, and I think this is fantastic opportunity. Quick question for you. Typically, time frame for once we get our kind of our pile of projects in a heap and we got the numbers figured out, what do you see as a time to execute?
My experience with negotiated deals is, you're all familiar with Davenport. They're your financial advisors. Typically, because you don't have to do a credit rating or presentation per se, we do have to compile preliminary financials. There's basically 2 windows, I guess. If you do it right after the beginning of the fiscal year, there's really no expectation that you're going to have the current financials in place. So you can use the prior year's financial and then do a very short, unaudited compilation of where you're at year-end. The longer you wait, there's more expectation, basically by September, October timeframe, that they want financials. So my recommendation is do it up front as much as you possibly can. But again, you're going to have to do some homework. Because it's negotiated, they'll send out a RFP to different banks. It's usually a 2-week turnaround time with that by the time, to get it back and evaluate. So I would say you're looking at a 2-month turnaround time by the time you talk to Davenport, get everything together, and then they get the RFPs responded to.
So that's really good news, and it certainly beats the timeline when we've done our past big bond issues or offers. So what this means is we could pursue this in a manner that we could realize the savings within the upcoming fiscal year, or as part of the upcoming fiscal year, without having, in essence, a break in service. So we would be in a position, I would think, that if we had, proceeds sometime in the first quarter, we certainly have cash hanging around. We could be using cash, if you will, that we have on hand, with the expectation that that loan comes through, and my overall budget can rely on this vehicle, and I could book that. Does that make sense?
2 things I would caution is the IRS is real picky relative to using proceeds to pay for prior expenses. So you have to make a disclosure on that when you vote to do this. It's a simple, there's an easy remedy, I should say, for that. I will talk to Jennifer again, Davenport, to get a more concrete timeline, so that I don't want to, I'm speaking for Davenport, right? So I'll get a little bit more input from them. But yes, in general terms, I think you would be able to take the lion's share of the savings in year 1.
Excellent. Yeah, the only thing I want to ensure is that we fund enough through the budget to keep maintenance and operation going until such time as we get the lump sum. That's the only concern I have, and other than that, the sooner the better, in my mind anyway, so as to keep it all simple.
Well, full disclosure, I did talk to Jen today, about the interest rates, and I shared with her the Excel spreadsheet just to make sure I wasn't going down a path, and she was, very happy with it. So if you want, I'll start talking about getting dates aligned and what steps we have to take to pursue it as we move through the budget process.
Excellent. Thank you so very much. This is great news. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So as my colleagues raised the good point about kind of using this new potential debt as a way of achieving some short-term savings, I know Councilmember Ndebu Madu had some specific thoughts or concerns around our previous PAYGO policies as well. Councilmember, I wanted to turn the floor over to you for kind of any additional
so
big-picture
much.
thoughts.
Thank you, Mayor, staff. First of all, Mr. Miller, just great job. Great job. Almost like, where have you been? But I'm glad to see that this analysis has come forward, and I think it's particularly helpful because, like all of my colleagues have said this evening, it highlights that there are opportunities to reduce the near-term pressure that we find ourselves facing through how we structure capital investments, and not only focusing on reductions. And I think I've been saying that since the beginning of our budget session here, that we have a huge opportunity here. I do want to ask you a question before I go into just broader next steps or observations. Is I just want to understand, I know that you've said there are opportunities to evaluate more areas across our budget to implement things like this and alongside of our reduction options. Do you have any of those opportunities top of mind, or is this the only one that you've looked at so far?
I've been kicking around ideas, that may help here and there, and then when you take them in aggregate. I will say this, back up a little bit. I am a proponent of PAYGO as much as you can, right? Because it does lessen the burden, interest burden, right? But there's a yin and yang with that, if you will. I also would say you want to maximize flexibility, budgetary flexibility, and how you use funds and how you allocate and restrict different types of revenue streams. And then, so one example is make sure, and this is not a big ticket item per se, but it's a discipline process. Make sure that we are returning funds, unspent funds, to fund balance, so that your encumbrances roll off and you, rather than them sitting out and you can't use them, have a policy where those fall back to fund balance on a more timely basis. Make sure that your prior year bond proceeds are reallocated when different projects are spent down, so that you're always using or maximizing those funds. The issue with bond funds is you have, in theory, 3 years to spend down bond proceeds in this, for IRS purposes. So those are some, again, they're not big ticket items, but it's more of discipline, just maximizing the use of your proceeds. We talked about, which I believe, and I talked to Mr. Mears about, is the use of program budgeting, so that you know where your programs are, and you can look at different programs from year to year to year. You do a great job with your line number budgets, zero-based budgeting, very, very detailed. And quite honestly, it's one of the few communities I've seen that does such a great job, and I tip my hat to the department heads for doing that. The thing I would add to that, though, is a line number comparison, so that you're looking at year over year over year. Right now, you're using current year to prior year. if you have a time series, a longer time series, you'll really be able to look at what that time series tells you on a more detailed basis. You know, I'm a detail guy. I like going through line number by line number by line number by line number. You guys, I would say, would hate looking at a line number by line number by line number type presentation. So, you know, it's knowing your audience, if you will, but having that discipline internally to look at that type of stuff. So yes, in a overall perspective, I think you can tweak things, but at the same time, I had to tip my hat to the community, you know, up to this point, because they are doing the fundamentals correctly. All right, there's opportunities, but nothing's broken and nothing's coming. The wheels aren't coming off the car, and you know, so I think you have a great foundation that you can build from.
Thank you so much, Mr. Miller. I appreciate you sharing some of your ideas around modernization efforts on how we can modernize our budget structure. I want to be clear, I am not indicting the pay-as-you-go model, and I'm not indicting the way that the budget process currently goes. Not my objective at all. What I'm trying to get to the heart of is the diversification that you're talking about, and the fact that we have for a very long time been over-indexed on certain areas. And if you look at any type of capital allocation or portfolio diversification, the number one philosophy is that you should never be over-indexed on one methodology. And that's basically what I'm trying to get to the heart of, and trying to make sure that I can expand the mind of how we think about that today, so that we can be getting more out of the today and the future because of the way that the world is evolving. And so I'm very much in alignment with a lot of the things that you're saying. I just want to get to the heart of what I'm trying to get for District 4 so that I can land the accurate comments. Part of what I'd like to understand, and you may not have this answer tonight, but what I'd like to understand in this setting is, are there more opportunities like this that you have currently observed across our entire capital program that we could be applying the same philosophy to, or are you not in a position to speak to that tonight?
Well, let me take that one for this evening. So we had talked on our first budget work session in regards to a number of our capital expenditures in terms of where we are. And I had relayed how many of the larger dollar items that we have planned for fiscal year 2027 already have funding sources associated with them. So I would say the majority of our capital expenditures for 2027 already have funding from other sources or already pre-planned associated with that, maybe 60 to 70% of those funds. We would have to take a look at the applicability of some of the smaller ones in terms of doing that. The larger answer to your question is, as we get into the out years associated with our capital program, just in the next 5 years, the entire capital program is looking at $64 million. And so if we look at more of those projects that don't have funding associated with them and are these larger dollar ones, they will lend themselves much more towards some capital financing. I think we can, if we are going to entertain the lighting debt, adding some more into that process, and seeing which capital projects we have here that could get added on to that. It's not going to be overwhelming in a significant amount, but we can certainly have some.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. What I would like to do is I would like to make a request to have that analysis done and be sent to council as soon as it is completed. And then one other thing that I'd like to introduce into this thought is, basically, I'd like, and this might not be an exercise that you can do right in this moment, but what I'm trying to get to the heart as, for example, when you talk about the lighting debt, I still very much strongly believe that this particular type of debt should be evaluated against external funding opportunities because of the way that the world is moving and because of the things that the state and the federal government are financing. Now, I do understand that adopting that level of methodology where we are either indexing now a little bit more on debt or external capital creates risk, and it actually creates a level of accountability, because if we don't deliver, then it is more visible, because with debt, you have to pay it back. And then with external capital, it relies on you getting the external capital. So I understand that it does create a little bit of resistance, because it introduces accountability in a certain way. So what I'd like to get back is I'd like to get back this analysis, no matter how big or small it is, it doesn't matter. I think the information will be relevant for me and my colleagues. So that's number one. I'd like to make that request. And then I'd also like to make sure that when you are doing this analysis, that I know that you already are, but I'd like to emphasize it on behalf of my district. When you are doing these exercising, that there are comparisons happening against how projects could be positioned with a more cohesive external funding strategy. I will deeply hold the conviction that I believe that this lighting can be paid for externally. I do not believe that we should be borrowing debt to pay for lights. I genuinely don't believe that. And that could be because I work in tech and I know what's being funded. So that could be why I hold that conviction. However, that's for me and all of my colleagues to make the decision on. But what I'd like to make sure of is that as you are evaluating these opportunities across the capital program where debt could be leveraged, that you are equally evaluating them against external funding as well, to make sure that same level of rigor is being applied. Because if we are going to diversify our capital strategy, meaning you have one bucket of taxes, external capital, as well as debt, then they all need to be scrutinized accordingly to the same level of rigor. And that is basically what I'm trying to get at. So I'd like to request that analysis. I do like where we are headed. I do believe that this introduces a different way of thinking of how we structure capital investments. So I think it is a healthy exercise for us to be going through. I do think at the same time, we need to be fully committed to evaluating external funding opportunities. And I don't mean that from a project by project basis. I'll repeat this over and over again, because that's not how larger models are funded. It is through larger thematic type of investment themes as to how capital flows. And so I just want to make sure that we are applying that same level of rigor across the board, and that all the necessary departments are being brought into that exercise so we can receive the most relevant level of data that we need to make the best decisions.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any of my other
Mr. Mayor, before you move on, I just want to make sure that my ask is clear.
Yes, it is.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any of my other colleagues on this topic?
Yes, just
Councilmember Truesdale.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for following back up with me, because earlier I said I didn't have any comments, but I do want to acknowledge the work that was put in, Mr. Miller and staff, for this opportunity right here. In terms of, we look at, having a problem, having a plan, and looking at the benefits. I was reading the essay too while we were kind of going over some of the discussions, but I do echo my colleague, Councilman Brady, in terms of if there's anything else that we can put into this, particularly the senior center issue, if we can look into that and to make sure that, or kind to see how, if or if not, it affects our AAA bonding. That is important. And when it comes down to compound interest, I love to be on the side where we're receiving savings more so than we're spending. So, thanks.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Dennis Brady.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick clarification, because we're talking about adding things and going out. I look at it as a bank and the bond market, kind of very simplistic. Typically, what is the length of time we're talking about going through each of those processes? If we go to the bond market, could it end up being next fiscal year rather than 27? And secondly, is there a dollar threshold at which we can't go to the bank and we have to go to the bond market? So I'm just curious on the fine niceties of this.
The as you know, the bond market is very, very flexible. And, it'll talk about maturity lengths, has a broader width to absorb those things along with the principal that you want to borrow. Typically, a bank won't go out more than 20 years. They may from time to time, depending upon the deal and whatnot. I have done deals with them for over $50 million, the larger institutions. So that is definitely a concern, or I shouldn't say a concern, a constraint relative to, so if we're putting a $20 million or $30 million deal on the table, that shouldn't be problematic. But if we start getting up to the $50 million range, that's going to, because they're borrowing opportunities from a bank's perspective. They don't want to put all their eggs in one basket either.
I understand.
So,
But the time frame, because you're talking about 20 years, time frame I'm talking about is going through the process of the application until we get the check.
the underwriting of the bond is relatively short. It's like the bond market itself.
Okay.
They rely on your rating, more or less. They're going to ask for your current financials, but it's not like an individual going to a bank and asking for a loan. It's a much shorter turnaround time.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, council member. Any of my other colleagues? Okay. Mr. Mears, what I think I would ask, trying to synthesize what my colleagues are saying, is for a recommendation from staff on how many projects to package into this particular loan. And if you could make a recommendation for the coming fiscal years this week, that would be great. And it'll give us an opportunity to try and maximize our opportunity with this new strategy. And thank you to council members and Ndibumadu and Brady and Rogers for bringing this idea forward.
Very good. We will work on that. So that, I think, wraps up almost all of the things that were on the list previously. We did have some discussion in regards to one other item, and that was budget software. Mr. Miller had gone out and gotten an estimate in regards to some budget software, and we think if we put in an addition of $100,000, that will give us sufficient room to acquire some software that may be able to assist us in the next budget process.
That was just 100,000?
Just.
Oh, dang. All right. Any questions from any of my colleagues on that front? Mayor Pro Tem?
Bargain at twice the price. Thank you.
200 it is.
And just for the folks following at home, Mr. Mears and Mr. Miller brought to our awareness recently that our existing budget process on the staff end is shockingly manual. And it's one of the reasons why we need so much additional time to kind of turn things around. And so my colleagues had the wise suggestion at our last meeting of seeing if we can't use a little technology to fix that, even if it means an upfront cost. So we anticipate some significant long-term savings from this investment. And moreover, this will make it a little bit easier to start doing the kinds of things that some of my council colleagues, like Councilmember Ndibumadu, have been raising for a while about better data visualization. And Councilmember Rogers brought up recently needing to make the budget documents more accessible and intelligible. Consumable was the word, I apologize, for those of us who are not accountants. So thank you for making this happen quickly. I know it'll take a little while to implement and train, but I'm grateful to my colleagues for being willing to make this investment despite the times that we're facing. Councilmember Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So with the $100,000, that includes the, is the system or the application big enough where you need to require maintenance? The things of that sort?
Excuse me. I called two vendors, a company called OpenGov, which I've used before, and then ClearGov, I think it's called. I have never used them. I've heard great things about them. They're both web cloud-based activity. So there's no support or no structural support from our end. It's on their end, it's more the connectivity and that type of thing. And depending upon how far you want to go into the implementation, that will drive the cost. So ClearGov gave me a quote of 20 grand just for the basic GFOA budget book. But then they were talking about other incremental costs with that, and not ever seeing it. I really wasn't comfortable saying $20,000 and going, oh, this isn't going to be enough to do too much of anything. So I went with a more robust cost, hoping that it will come down, but it will give you flexibility to do what you need to do. And again, the other options are pretty much in line with that. I stayed away from a mainframe technology where you own it. It's a dinosaur these days. So I think this will give you the flexibility to do what you need to do. And we'll do, the dog and pony show, if you will, and I'll let future staff drive that bus.
Right, thank you so much. They probably will download patches that upgrade the system, the
Exactly.
technology. And the major thing for us is to make sure we don't do a lot of customizing, because that's always a big deal. That doesn't help anything, and making sure it's integrated with any other applications we may have.
Well, when they said that they have a GFOA ready template, it was like, okay,
Outstanding.
that means I don't have to spend, as you were saying, all the time on customized reports.
Great, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
One thing, several residents caught me before we walked in tonight and had a few specific questions they just wanted me to throw out to confirm for staff. Some folks are watching at home, some folks are here. One question that came up, do we currently charge a fee or a rate for use at our vegetable gardens, our community gardens? $40. I know we got a couple of gardeners up here.
I could tell you, $40.
It's 40 yearly or a month?
Year.
Oh, okay, pretty good deal, okay. And then also some questions related to the ball fields. Staff shared with us a prospective fee schedule for this coming fiscal year, where we are moderately increasing fees pretty much across the board. Did staff have any updates or any new information that we may have not yet seen on that front?
We don't have anything new compared to what we shared with you already.
Okay, great. But generally speaking, across the board, we're going to be increasing fees, particularly with a focus on non-resident users?
Yes, sir.
Perfect, okay. A couple residents brought up questions about whether or not we could do subscription-based services for things like trash, recycling, vacuum leaf pickup. My understanding is there's some communities that may do that, but it's basically where every individual person is having to subscribe to a private company to pick up those services. For us, that wouldn't necessarily be a realistic model, that's my understanding. But I wanted to posit that question since that was one that was given to me recently.
I have worked in both environments where the service has been contracted out and where the local government has done it. I have done it where the community has billed the resident directly for the contracted service, or the local government has paid for it. Everybody always wants the one that they don't have. There are pros and cons to all of them in regards to doing it. It is something that we could look at and explore, but shortly after we do it, we would miss some of the things that we had in terms of the responsiveness and the reduced burden of not having to bill everybody.
Right. It's a little bit like Comcast and Verizon. Everyone who wants Verizon's a Comcast customer and vice versa. I will say, I know we explored that a few years ago. It's possible some of my colleagues may have been there for that conversation. My recollection, going all the way back to George at the Public Works Department, was that because our in-house maintenance is so thorough, and because we have an equipment acquisition and replacement fund, we were essentially keeping all of our material costs pretty well contained doing it as a city, rather than paying a contractor to do it who's often has additional costs, because we're also paying for their wear and tear and their replacement and so on and so forth. So just throwing that out there. Okay. Any of my colleagues have anything for staff right now on anything that we have discussed so far this evening? Great. Next, I'm going to move us into a couple new things. One of our hopes tonight is to try and get a sense of where we want to head overall with going into next week with the tax rate, with the long-term plan to get the fund balance back on track, and then discuss how we want to handle budgets going forward. I'll just give as a quick recap some things that I've heard as different colleagues have reached out to me over the last week and a half, and as staff and I have talked over the last week and a half. A few just quick notes trying to synthesize, and then I'll invite any of my colleagues to jump in if I missed anything or misrepresent anything. One of the biggest concerns, and staff, correct me if I'm wrong, that staff has at this moment related to the city's AAA bond rating, and Director Miller said it a moment ago, it has more to do with the fund balance than anything else. Our overall debt levels are very low, as we were just discussing. It gives us a little room there. But the fact that the fund balance, even with, as we started this budget, the 20-cent tax increase, the fact that that fund balance is still zeroed out at the end of this budget process is the number one thing that would get us in trouble with the credit ratings agencies. And so one of the things that I've heard clearly from staff, one of the things that I've heard just in getting some third-party opinions from folks who are following these discussions and work in these fields, is that that is the most urgent task we have, to have a believable, workable plan to get the fund balance back on track. That we cannot at any point go to the ratings agencies and say, well, we know we're out of a fund balance, we might raise taxes in the future, or we might cut something else, that simply won't work. So that's one thing that has come up in conversation. The other thing that came up is what we discussed tonight, as Councilmember Ndibu Madu brought up, kind of revisiting PAYGO, and it looks like we're making some adjustments on that front, and there may be opportunities to keep going down the road. The other thing that came up, there is pretty much a universal, more or less universal sentiment from the City Council that budgets should not be treated as a final say when it comes to efficiency and cost savings. That is something that the vast majority of my colleagues want to continue working on through and following the budget process. And to that end, several of my colleagues have posited the idea of something like a council budget subcommittee that would meet regularly. It can be monthly or every other week, whatever my colleagues prefer, that has the goal of persistently looking at where we can be achieving savings, looking at and evaluating possible additional funding streams, whether that's grants that my colleagues are learning about as they're at meetings with COG or MML or PGCMA, or for those of us who are very well connected, maybe at even higher levels of government. And then also evaluating through our strategic plan process and evaluating through the goals and objectives that we lay out in our budget documents where we are on track, where we are falling short, and where we can continue to achieve new efficiencies, working with city staff. The only thing I'll add to that is that I've heard a lot from our civil service leadership recently. There are a lot of ideas out there, and creating opportunities where council and staff can meet and talk about ideas could create some synergy for us to find some things where we can save, or maybe even figure out how we can do more with less going down the road. So I'm just going to throw those out there as a few general ideas that came up, and I want to turn it over to my colleagues in case they want to add, have any questions about any of that, or want to discuss any of those proposals. Councilmember Ndibu Madu.
I just have a quick question, and then I want to listen to colleagues, and then I'll come back with my other remarks. Is there a possibility at all to, I know that there's a transfer from the general fund going on in this budget cycle. Is there a possibility to free up any amount of that to leave anything in the general fund to avoid balancing it out to zero?
City staff.
Short answer is yes, we could.
And what is that current dollar amount as it stands based on our work this last week?
transfer of unassigned fund balance into fiscal year 2027 is approximately $1.7 million included in this budget. So if you wanted to retain some of those funds, you would have to address that through either cost savings or tax rate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's my one question. I'll pause for now.
Sounds good. Colleagues? Councilman Brady.
Thank you. I'll start with the last item you mentioned with regards to the budget subcommittee. I'm against that. Not to do that, but rather to structure it as a subcommittee. I think it's something we should do as a body, and we should meet as frequently as necessary. In talking to the Mayor Pro Tem, the number was thrown out that we do it quarterly. It doesn't matter how often we do it, but I think we need to have a structure. And better yet, I think maybe what we ought to do is look at our yearly calendar and start populating it with certain things that occur in certain parts of the calendar year, whether it's the first quarter or the last quarter, in order to stay ahead of the game with regards to the budget, with regards to the services and what have you. I think we get a better feel for what's going on, get feedback from the staff in a probably a more efficient fashion, so that I would suggest not that we don't do it, but rather we do it as a committee of the whole rather than a subcommittee. I have no problems with regards to the PAYGO that you suggest have a discussion. That's one of the comments I made at the very beginning, that we really need to look at our capital improvement program and look at all of them and see, is there a better way to do it? Are there things that maybe we shouldn't be doing? Are there things that maybe we should push out a little further because they are not of that significant of importance at this point in time? So it goes into all of that aspect of it. So that, at least for now, those are my two comments. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. Gotcha. So summarizing, essentially, we agree conceptually with the ongoing look at the budget, but structure it as a committee of the whole as opposed to as a subcommittee. I have no problem with that suggestion. And my suspicion is that's probably right, because my guess is everyone's going to want to be on this group. I don't think there's anyone volunteering not to join this.
Subcommittee of the whole.
A subcommittee of the whole. Okay. Councilmember Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councilman Brady, for your comments. So I actually was the one that brought it up as far as having a budget committee, and I came up with this idea. I went back and I looked at some of the county council videos and paperwork around budgeting over the last 20, 25 years. And one of the things that I saw they had done was create a budget committee. Now, they had a small number of council members that were on that budget committee, but my thoughts were more aligned with making sure that we take this budget seriously, that we take our expenditures seriously, that we track this more often than every quarter. But we've gotten ourselves into a situation over the last several years that has resulted in us sitting here these last few days trying to figure out how we keep moving forward. So it just gives a sense of responsibility. It lets our residents know that we're serious about that. Now, with this all being said, I know the county council has different committees, and it's the entire body, and they switch from being the county council to the planning committee or something, some kind of committee. I'm okay with that. My real concern is around accountability and making sure that we follow through on what we have said we're going to do. That is just, to me, key and critical. So if we choose to do it as an entire body And we know how we are. If we choose to do it that way, then fine. Then there has to be a commitment to it, and we have to hold ourselves responsible for doing it. So that's my comments around that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So what I'm hearing from Councilmember Rogers is agreement with committee of the whole, but make sure we're sticking to the calendar, we're sticking to the plan. And along what you said about accountability, Councilmember Ndibumadu said this earlier, the word accountability, you know, as Councilmember Brady and others have suggested in this budget process, you know, and I know as Councilmember Rogers has said many times, you know, this represents a culture shift for the city of Bowie. It took many years to kind of dig us into this hole. It's going to take a few years to dig out. I think we're taking a big, good, responsible chunk this year. I'm quite proud of this body for all the different ideas that have come forward in a very short period of time. But this, however we structure it, as Councilmember Rogers is saying, will be an opportunity for us to ensure a different culture going forward, both for this body and also for our relationship with city staff and for our expectations in making sure that we're moving forward in a manner that's sustainable in the long run. Mayor Pro Tem Wolfley, and then Councilmember Ndibumadu afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm perfectly fine with you know, doing it as a group as a whole. I think a work session type environment is probably appropriate for this. And I do think that there needs to be a frequency greater than, you know, quarterly, and for two reasons. We don't want to lose the feedback loop. Don't want the feedback loop on ideas to become, you know, 3 months at a clip. Hey, I've got a great idea. Let's shave a little here and do this and do that. And I says, oh, okay, we'll go do some research. You know, then another quarter goes by and you go like, okay, I think we got it. Let's polish it off. Okay, and then another quarter goes and you go like, wow, that's great. But now it's not this year, it's next year. It doesn't help us in the short term. So I do think a more frequent, and maybe that they're shorter sessions. They don't have to be particularly long, but I think that would be in order. And I would also say to Councilwoman Rogers, I agree wholeheartedly about the accountability issue, and nothing helps with accountability like having a measurable number, a bogey sitting out there right out front that says, all right, this group, we're looking for $5 million. We're looking for what is that? What is that number? Maybe it's not 5 million, maybe it's more, maybe it's less. That's, I think, for the group as a whole to decide. But regardless, to sit there and say, our objective this year is to have you know, reductions on a repeatable reductions, sustainable reductions, not just kick the can down the road reductions that meet this dollar value. And it might be personnel reductions, it might be service reductions, it might be growth through revenues, such as grants or what have you, that reduce our cost while sustaining the service level. I think that combination, looking at all of those together, pick a bogey, and everybody knows what the target is, with a definable date that helps us determine what the tax rate is for next year. If we're able to determine that we can save $4 million on an ongoing annual basis, then congratulations. Maybe that's 4 cents off the tax rate, or maybe it's 2 cents off the tax rate and 2 more cents into the balance of the reserve fund, and we could pick that number as well. But nonetheless, I think if we had something along those lines, I think collectively we'd be a bit more inspired, and everybody would have that shared vision and have an understanding of what it takes to get there and the scope of things. So that's my thought, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I could be wrong. I think the quarterly meeting suggestion might have been related to a specific budget cadence, staying on top of budget goals, not necessarily the total meeting number, but maybe that's something we can discuss later on.
It can be flexible.
Can be flexible. Okay, understood. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Ndibumadu.
Thank you so much, Mayor Stev. Helpful to hear the thoughts of my colleagues. I will couple my remarks with thoughts, and then I have just two questions for staff. One on the subcommittee. I think it's a brilliant idea, wholeheartedly support it, and pretty much align with everyone here. I'm fine either way, whether it's a few council members of all council members. The only thing I would ask is that we stay accountable and that everybody participates if we're going to do a bunch of all council members. And the reason why I say that is there are times where scheduling kind of presents a challenge because not everybody can respond or not everybody can participate, and then meetings get delayed. And so that would be my only top of mind, is that if this is going to be the case and it's going to be all of council, that everybody commits to that level of commitment accordingly so that we can stay accountable. So I think the subcommittee is a brilliant idea. I also think the subcommittee thought should be expanded a little bit more. So I know we have the contemplation of this particular subcommittee, but I brought up the idea of having a subcommittee on whether that's municipal revenue expansion or long-term economic base expansion, whatever that looks like, and I say this because there are a number of different council members here that have individual strengths and unique domains in which they operate. And I genuinely believe that we could be getting more from each member on this body based on the domains in which they occupy to contribute more to the city if we had a different structure versus us bringing isolated ideas one after the other and not necessarily grouping things and presenting a holistic solution for all of us to discuss or to either vote on. There have been times where we'll bring forth an idea, people will say, that sounds great, thanks for listening, and then nothing will happen. And so I think the subcommittee structure kind of presents a unique opportunity for us to leverage that and gain more out of the different levels of expertise and the varying domains that we have on this body. So I think that thought should actually be extended and expanded, and we should look at some sort of municipal revenue subcommittee or economic base expansion subcommittee. I will couple that with, I know that the state is going to do a task force, but just understand that task force only has 6 members, and that's for across the entire state. So while that may be helpful information for us to ingest, it's not necessarily, may not solve our structural problem because each city and municipality is unique. So I'll leave that there. Then the second part I have is for staff. Is it possible for us to rerun projects at a lower baseline growth instead of the 6% projection that we currently have?
Yes.
Perfect. I would love to see what those options and numbers look like. And then I think that would, and obviously I'm getting at that towards the general fund. So that would be helpful to understand. And then the other question that I have is, have we adopted, or do we currently have vacancy management targets? And what I mean by that is on the lens of attrition.
I don't think I'm exactly following your question. Could you
Right now, it is my understanding that attrition is treated as a natural occurrence, which is a byproduct of just the labor market, environmental factors, different flows of how labor is evolving. Do we have targets in that area, or are we just approaching that as it's a byproduct of what happens in the market?
I would say no, we don't have any specific targets associated with that.
Okay, another thought for council that I'll leave here as well, because essentially, as we've seen in this budget, there has been, I just want to be accurate on my numbers. I think it is around 1.5 million. I think 1.5 million, or sorry, there's a number that has been associated in regards to attrition. So I think we have whatever that number is right now. I don't have it right in front of me. I'm trying to pull
It is
it up.
it is 1.5 that we had discussed.
Okay, perfect. If there, I would like to bring forward for consideration if we can look at formally adopting some sort of target, some sort of vacancy management target. I'm categorizing as vacancy management because essentially we've just adopted, or not adopted. Oh my gosh, sorry, my mind is not working properly. We have just experienced potential savings there. So what I'm looking for is something that formalizes that potentially year over year for positions that essentially phase out or are no longer needed, to have a sort of target there. That's the second area that I'll bring forth for consideration. And then the last point that I'll make is I completely understand what people are saying around setting goals, and I definitely am always going to align with setting goals. I think that also needs to be paired with the restructuring of the system. The way that any system functions is what creates the incentives that you get from the system. And so you can set a goal and people can happily miss the goal as well. And so I just want to make sure that as we continue to go through this process, which I think we're doing a great job of so far, that we continue to redesign the system so that it works the way that we intend for it to work, as opposed to we set KPIs and goals or OKRs, and then at the end of the year, we don't meet them, and then we're wondering why we didn't meet them, and then we just blame it on the market, because not everything is attributed to the market. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Those conclude my comments.
Councilmember Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councilwoman. Those were good, interesting remarks. They were good remarks. And it reminded me of another comment that Mr. Miller made, which was around program accounting. And I don't think we may not understand how important program accounting is, because it's a strong tool that's going to help us prioritize based on value and not just tradition or politics. So it shows the true cost of services, it improves decision-making, it strengthens transparency and accountability, it links spending to outcomes, and it helps identify efficiencies, redundancies, and it supports grant funding and partnerships. It takes time to implement this. It takes a lot of work, and there's usually some struggle around overhead, around HR, IT, and facilities. That's an ongoing thing. But once you have it in place, it makes it very easy to pull the data out, and that's the information that I was missing as we were going through this exercise. I did not have the data to help me see the trends over 5 years, to help me understand what programs would be impacted. So I just didn't want to miss that point. So thank you again, Mr. Miller, for that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Councilwoman Rogers. I want to follow up on your comment there, which with a question for staff and Mr. Miller. Perhaps he knows. For our current ERP system or equivalent is Munis, right? Do they have an ABC, an activity-based costing module?
Not that I'm aware of. That the last time I really delved into Munis was about 10 years ago now. So it may have changed.
Gotcha. Because I think that is, in essence, what we really benefit from, if there were that sort of a module, so that the accounting for one program or project across a dozen different offices can be all accurately reflected and tracked, holistically.
Yeah. I'll be more than happy to reach out to them tomorrow.
That'd be outstanding. Thank you kindly.
Yes, sir.
So I'll just say I strongly agree with the comments that my colleagues have made. Tonight, Councilmember Ndee Bumadu was talking about really thinking about, the structures of systems, which I agree with wholeheartedly. I think she's absolutely right. And specifically, one of the things that's come up both on the staff end and the council end these last few weeks is, as we face the $20 million budget hole we had this year, there are a lot of ideas out there, and I think there's a strong openness to change how we operate down to the system level. As the council member was saying, the challenge that I think I've heard from a lot of folks, including my colleagues, is trying to implement a lot of changes in a very short budget window is challenging. And I think the big thing that I'm hearing from council and staff is they really want to continue to evaluate these opportunities in settings where we're not rushed to face statutory deadlines. And so, to the Councilmember DiMatto's point, this work is going to have to take place over time. It's not something that we're going to solve in the next 2 weeks. It is going to take a while, but I think it's work that, knowing all of my colleagues, they are absolutely committed to doing on an ongoing basis and making sure that we're building, as the council members have been saying, accountability in the system, both for our goals and for our spending, and thinking about how we can be more innovative along the way. And we have a lot of champions for that on this body. All that being said, the two main things that I'm hoping we can address tonight are, one, coming to a general consensus on how we want to approach our tax rate for fiscal year 2027. We formally vote on the rate on Monday, May 4. We have identified a few $1 million in specific cuts, thanks to this group's work on Monday. I know that there are other things in the budget that we could look at down the road, and as I'm talking to staff and my colleagues, some of those additional changes will require ongoing evaluation. They're unlikely going to be things that we're going to want to change within the next, essentially, tonight through Monday. It's going to need to be strategic, orderly, and goals-based. Those are the main words that I've heard my colleagues use. And so what I would propose is that in order to protect our AAA bond rating, in order to ensure that we're going into next year in a stronger position, and knowing that we can continue to make adjustments going into next year's budget, revising things downward, I think it will make the most sense for us to stick to the original proposed 20-cent tax rate increase for fiscal year 2027. And as we go into next year, and we find additional savings and we find additional revenue opportunities, and we continue doing the work of streamlining, we will have opportunities not only to make more progress replenishing our fund balance, which will give us more flexibility on debt service going forward, but it will also put us in a position where our AAA bond rating is safe, and where potentially, if things go well, we could look at lowering that rate in the future, provided that our fund balance is safeguarded and our long-term debt is under control. So I want to propose that to my colleagues this evening and see if there's a general consensus in that direction.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a clarifying question?
Councilmember Ndibumadu.
So thank you so much. So is your proposal that we adopt the 20-cent tax increase, and with the cost savings that we have identified in this last exercise, that would go to the general fund, or essentially we just adopt the 20-cent tax increase and then the general fund would still be zeroed out? I just want to make sure I clearly understand.
Go into the reserve fund balance to start making progress towards getting our fund balance closer to its statutory minimum, specifically to protect our bond rating.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember.
That question
And
is
then,
staff.
Mr. Mayor, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Ndibumadu and then Councilmember Brady. Go ahead, Councilmember Ndibumadu.
It's just one quick question. Then with this last conversation that we had around the street lights, would that contribute anything in this cycle, or would that be for later cycles if we were to move forward with that?
Mike?
Sorry, city staff.
I think from the discussion we had earlier, I think we were looking at that for this cycle.
Okay, so that would take it from 3 to 4 million. I just need all the numbers laid
Yes.
out precisely. Okay, are there any other numbers that are missing that we should be considering?
Sorry,
If I
Director
may.
Miller.
Yeah, back to the savings on the light program. You have the original $3 million that you went through Monday night, but the $1 million, I'm just going to call it of savings, that's all contingent on how quickly we could roll that out and implement. So what I would recommend is that the city adopt a budget with the $3 million worth of cuts, and then when you implement the borrowing strategy, that will follow the fund balance regardless. And as the mayor noted, you can make an adjustment to the budget once that all is implemented. So rather than throwing estimates up against the wall with a timeline that could go 4 or 5 months, by the time you start to finish, hopefully it's quicker than that. Again, I would just caution on a conservative route, take the $3 million, and then when you get the $16 million or $20 million bond, then you, at that time, you can execute a budget adjustment.
Thank you, Councilmember Ndibumadu. Councilmember Brady.
Thank you. Just, staff had identified $7+ million, and we agreed to $3.8 million. And that is, that $3.8 million doesn't immediately address the transfer of the $1.7 million from the undesignated reserves. So in essence, we would be only, the savings would only be $2.1 million roughly if we leave the reserve fund alone. And we immediately, real quickly, came up with nearly $1 million with regards to the CIP, added to the whatever the million was with regard to the cable replacement and LEDs. So we're talking about what looks to be about $3 to $4 million that we are doing, and that is all predicated on we aren't adjusting the tax rate, but leaving the tax rate as proposed. Is that correct? So that we then have $3 to $4 million to put into the undesignated reserve fund, which I don't have a big problem with that, although there is some concern because we started this whole process kind of running around screaming and hollering about 20-cent tax increase. We've got to do something. And 2 weeks later, it looks like we've capitulated and said, oh, we're going to do the tax increase anyway. So I've got some concerns about the look that that gives for this body in moving forward with the fact that we seem to be all over the map on a solution. And I will throw one thing out. I'm reluctant to do it, but there's in the current budget, and this money is really spread over 8 to 10 years, so we've got time to replace it. But in this year's budget, there's $2 million designated to go into the equipment acquisition fund that is not obligated this year. It's for future purchases. So if we're looking at ways to reestablish our undesignated reserve fund, we might want to look at half or all of that for this year, but then also through this subcommittee of the whole and our commitment and staff's commitment, look to replenish that in the equipment acquisition fund in the next 3 to 5 years. But that'll give us an opportunity to make it a more healthier value in our unrestricted fund balance. Thank you.
Well, and I agree with, I think, everything you're saying, Councilmember Brady. And I think the council member raises the operative point, which is that, we have a lot more detail to look into on many of the balances. The council member correctly raises the equipment and acquisition fund, as well as the undesignated fund balance. So these are absolutely things that I think we need to go into greater detail on and make sure that we're replenishing all these funds and keeping us on track. So I'm totally agreed with that. And as far as the tax rate, I totally hear you. I know exactly where you're coming from. I understand it. I think for me, based both on the kind of tenor of the overall resident feedback we've gotten, and to your point, thinking about what next year is going to look like, what I don't want to do is put us in a position where we go into next year with still a relatively substantial tax increase, but then something goes wrong and we wind up in a position where we're having to raise taxes yet again because, God knows something happens with the economy or there's more federal layoffs and our property values decline, or, we run into some other challenge. My personal hope is that we can go into next year in a position of strength as much as possible, such that if anything, if there's any future change to the tax rate, it's a change in favor of our taxpayers. That's my hope. I have no qualms with anyone having a difference of opinion. At the end of the day, we are a service provider, and different people expect different things out of the services we offer, and they have very different expectations of what those services should cost. I think if any of us who've been here for a while know anything, it's that people have wildly different ideas about this, and that's okay. I respect that. Any of my colleagues have any additional thoughts? Councilmember Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've listened to the comments so far. My concern sitting here with you today is that I have seen the city staff come forward and make cuts that almost take them to the point of diminishing return. Because we don't want you to cut and have to figure out how to work overtime. But we do know when you cut, and if you cut very close, then at some point you become less effective. So I do want to understand, I do want to let you know I understand that. But with that being said, I hear, we're very concerned about our AAA credit rating, and we should be. That's a very important thing. And we also are very concerned about restoring our reserve account. My major concern is that not one taxpayer asked for this. What we're doing is, not that I know we have to move forward with this, but I have to do my due diligence. I have had citizens call me, residents call me and say, if you increase my taxes on my $800,000 home, and I've been, in fact, impacted by federal cuts, this is going to hurt me, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to live in Bowie any longer. And I have to put that out there. We're talking about implementing a 20% tax increase on residents and businesses. And this area, most of all, Prince George's County, has been heavily impacted by federal job cuts. So that on top of this is an issue. So I say all this to say, if there's an opportunity to even cut the tax increase by even a penny, would be one thing less that our residents would have to deal with. I just feel I have to do my due diligence. I know I've heard the stories. I know we have to do something, and I know the people in this room have done the best they could and the most they could, and now it's on the residents that have to suffer the consequences of inaction over the last 20 years. And so if we could take a penny cut on the interest rate for the residents here in Bowie and move the remaining into the fund balance as we work through other savings, to me would be appropriate. Like I said, I'm doing my due diligence because it's a lot of people out here that although there's assumptions that they have money because they have more expensive homes, please don't assume that, because a lot of them are federal employees or federal contractors. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I totally agree, council member, and I appreciate you raising that specifically. And I think I can speak for some members of my household who also say thank you, because I know my household is not excited about this even a little bit. I appreciate you saying that, council member.
Mr. Mayor?
Council member Nde Bumadu.
Oh, I just wanted to be added to the queue. Is it my turn?
I can turn to you next, council member.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really want to echo the sentiments of Councilmember Rogers and just say I completely understand this work is not easy, and I know that I know that our city staff is trying the best that they can to maintain services and really be diligent about what areas may not be as effective or needed anymore in this current moment. So I do want to honor that, and I do want to say that I see that and I respect it and very deeply appreciate it. I also want to say on behalf of District 4, because as we've talked about so many times on this body, District 4 is one of the fastest growing districts, and it's filled with a lot of large homes that are in a particular price point, as well as homes that are in a different price point. And so we run the gamut on the types of homes and the value of homes that sit in our district. I remember at the very beginning of this process, when we had our listening session in South Bowie, constituents made one thing very, very clear. If you're going to ask me to carry this burden with you, you also equally need to have skin in the game. And what that looks like to me is not a full tax increase. I understand that some sort of tax increase needs to happen, but not a full tax increase. And so I think for me, on behalf of District 4, and echoing Councilmember Rogers' comments, wherever we can find opportunities from now until May 4th, to continue to trim at that 20-cent number would be very, 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 very behooving. And I say this because, as Councilmember Rogers said, the federal government is seeing a number of different fluctuations. A lot of people think that because in certain parts of Bowie, there are large homes, that they can afford those large homes. But a lot of people are struggling, and we all know that to be true. But in addition to a lot of people struggling, I don't want to see a situation where at the end of the year, people receive a tax bill that they cannot afford, and then there's a lien on their property, and that leads to more consequential outcomes for their family and everybody that they are trying to support. And so I understand there are two sides of this story, but I want to make sure that as Councilmember Rogers, I'm also doing my due diligence on behalf of District 4 because of the constituents that we have there and in the comments that have been raised. And so it is my desire to continue to see opportunities in areas of where things can be rearranged. I understand that we've identified some cuts around $3 million, and that's great. A job well done, and it's a meaningful effort. It's the first time I've ever seen us do anything like that on this council. So it's truly, truly, truly a job well done. But I also want to see if there are other areas where we can identify more, because I genuinely think if we are going to raise taxes by some stretch, there needs to be an opportunity to shave at that tax number. That 20 cents is a lot. That is a 50% increase. That is a lot. That means my bill is jumping from 10 to 20. That's a lot for a lot of people. And so I want to conclude my remarks there and really implore us to walk away from this session with finding additional areas to cut down at that 20-cent number, because that is genuinely going to be catastrophic for a lot of families in District 4. Thank you.
Well, I totally agree, Councilmember. And to the point you were making earlier, now we're at the point where we're looking at kind of bigger structural changes. And that's ultimately, as you said earlier, kind of where we're going to have to be thinking. And, as far as I think my goal, and one of the things that I heard consistently from most of my colleagues these last few days, is that, if we were to raise taxes 20 cents, our mission is to do everything we can through our kind of new accountability structure to figure out where we can achieve those efficiencies and those additional revenue streams to bring that down as quickly as possible in a way that is sustainable, protects our bond rating, and protects our taxpayers. Absolutely.
But Mr. Mayor, let me just offer one more thing to you, because that's a great comment. What happens to the families who potentially lose their homes because of this? That's where I'm going, because in District 4, and we've seen this in the history of the United States of America, sometimes when things like this happen, there are consequential outcomes that follow. And so what do we then do when that bill comes and there are certain populations of our residency that cannot afford it, and now they have liens on their properties? What does that look like? How are we prepared to step up differently? How are we prepared to assist? What I'm not hearing right now is, okay, we increase taxes and we accept the proposal, but then in a year we come back and cut it. I'm not hearing that right now. What I hear is a blanket proposal, and it's a starting point. So I'm acknowledging the starting point, but I'm also acknowledging the other side of the argument for those that could very well find themselves in that predicament.
Totally heard, council member. And there is no doubt between energy bills, water bills, property tax value growth, and just general inflation, not to mention on the employment side, a lot of people being let go at the federal level, there is no doubt that a lot of folks are hurting. And I'm very open to ideas on how we can step in and fill the gap for people who are suffering right now. I totally agree. Councilmember Truesdale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I definitely totally agree in terms of this is going to be a difficult time right now for us. We are, as Bowie, victims of our own success, right? Which is to say a lot. Representing District 3, we have great residents, but not only that, we probably have the most businesses in all 4 districts as well. And to look at, the incline of businesses and some major businesses that choose, I guess, to leave in terms of, you have to ask why in terms of, you have the brick and mortar along with the residents that purchase and that allow these businesses to thrive. I've seen from a business perspective, a lot of business has been hurting, but at the same time, we do have inflation, we have those things, but with gas prices, et cetera, I think we need to really evaluate, think outside the box, continue to do what we've done tonight to work as a collaborative effort. I would like to bring up my colleague brought up something a couple of weeks ago in terms of the 20%. Councilman Brady, what would 15% look like? What would 10? What would 5? Just to have, at least to have a scope of, how we measuring our value. And, so I think it's really going to come down to probably the last hour of evaluating and just, understanding that, there's, the structure, we have to look down the line. It didn't happen overnight. It's not a bad thing. It's just a thing in terms of, us working together and evaluating our resources that we have here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to circle back and taking into account and kind of adding to the comments that Councilwoman Ndebumadu made about where we go with our taxes and what the future looks like. I think that gets back to that issue of accountability and picking a number that looks good from a standpoint of it's attainable, but also that's meaningful, which would be something along the lines of saying, so far, the way I've calculated, we had 3.8 million in savings that we had that we had accepted based on our review from last meeting and refinements this meeting. That's 3.8 million, thanks to the good works of our finance director. We're looking at about 1.125 lighting program savings by taking that, capitalizing it. So that comes out to 1.125. Just for funsies, I'll toss in another $250,000 for the LED, which you didn't incorporate. I'll ignore the savings on the electric bills because we don't have the data and it's not going to amount to much anyway in the grand scheme in terms of what's here. So that brings us to about 5.189 million in cuts and savings through management approaches on the borrowing as well as the cuts. So that gives us the 5.1. That's certainly obviously enough. It stops the bleeding out of the fund. So we were taking 1.7 to zero it out. So if we stop pulling money out of there, that leaves us with an actual savings of about 3.48 million, kind of at the end of the day. And I think that at present represents the fungible amount, which is based on where we are. If we have 3.4 million, call it 3.5, if you want to round it up, then that 3.5 either becomes money for the reserve fund or it becomes taxes not collected. So I think the discussion we have amongst ourselves is where on that continuum we end up in terms of taking the tax increase and reducing it, or upping the reserve fund balance. And I think to the councilwoman's point made earlier, which is what's it look like the following year. And I do believe that as our budget group gets going here, we need to have a commitment, and it says, hey, I'm good for $5 million, figuring out where we're going to find $5 million, which again is either 5 cents that I could reduce my taxes next year, or it's 5 million going into the reserve fund. But I think we ought to pick a reasonable number that we think is attainable, but is also meaningful enough that we can say, hey, right now it's 20 cents or it's 19 cents or whatever we decide on, and then we're going to tackle it again over the course of the next fiscal year, looking for another 5 cents worth of either tax reduction or contributions to the reserve fund. Probably a balance of the two would be my guess. So I do think that if we could collectively come to terms on what we want to do with that $3.5 million, how much of it goes to the reserves and how much of it goes to the tax reduction, or a reduction in the proposed 20-cent tax. I think that that's where our focus should be. And I think that we then also have to make that commitment on, I'm going to call it $5 million just because it's easy to have a number. So thank you.
Any of my other colleagues? Councilmember Brady.
I appreciate all the input and the feedback with regard to this, but it still is problematic if the savings, if we split it in half and put 1.7 back into the unrestricted reserve and 1.7 cut in taxes, 18-cent tax increase is still significant. And as we've heard, the impact could be devastating for some. And there was a rhetorical question like, what would that look like? We'll just go back to the 2008, 2009 problem that the housing market had, where a lot of people lost their homes because of some questionable activity. But a lot of what they were building up in the way of equity in their homes disappeared almost overnight. So we've got a major problem. And we had an opportunity to cut a little bit more. And so it's problematic that we're just trying to skim off the top to maybe make people feel good. And I understand that we need to build back up the reserves, and it drives one question to staff with regards to the reserves. What is a healthy number for reserves as far as, I know we have the policy with regard to the 25% of the operating, but what is a reasonable number that we should target for, and what would be kind of like the optimal number to target for?
Well, again, it's a function of the total community, okay? So if you have a strong tax base, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they look at management, they look at a whole bunch of different matrix to determine what a AAA is.
Right.
Speaking from past experience, for example, Annapolis, we were 18%, and we took it up to 25%, and we still could not get a AAA rating because of other factors. Personally, I think you want to be an unrestricted, not aggregated, but unrestricted fund balance. I would recommend trying to target around 15%. And then from there, you can get a baseline relative to where you are and where you're not, and what the rating agencies are telling you. But even today, it's going to take you a while to get to that 15%. It's going to take you a while to get to the 10%. But, and then, again, work with Davenport and work with the rating agencies to figure out where you are. Fitch has a very, very, very complicated, so they just updated about 2 years ago, a matrix of how you fit in. So I'm reluctant to give you a number, but I will say that you want to target, a healthier number than not.
Okay. Another factor you want to consider is the nature of what your government services are and what you're trying to do. A community that is stable and trying to just provide the services that it provided last year might not need as healthy a reserve as a community that is looking to reinvest in itself, that is looking to find new opportunities. So if we want to have greater flexibility for reinvesting back in ourselves, having a larger fund balance gives more opportunity to take advantage of those things.
Fully understand that. Just a clarification, 15% of what with regards to the fund balance?
Your expenditures.
Expenditures or operating?
Operating expenditures.
Okay, so basically the operating budget, not the total budget, but the operating budget.
The operating budget, and then you take a look at the enterprise separately, because they have a little bit, I think it's like 6 months worth of reserves, which is almost 50% of your operating budget for some large capitalization costs. So each one's different.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, council member. So staff, if we were to put the whole 3.5 million in savings into our unrestricted fund balance, what percentage would that have as at roughly?
3%.
Yeah, a little over 3%.
A little over 3%.
Yeah.
And we need to try and get to 15. Okay.
So the number that we're using here is the unrestricted fund balance, and we do have restricted funds as well that factor into this. Your flexibility is ultimately your unrestricted fund balance.
Understood. Mayor Pro Tem.
A quick clarification point, that 3%, that's based on a budget of 98, right?
This is a $98 million budget, yes.
So we actually would be, in our current model, we're looking at 1.7 that would not have been depleted, plus adding the 3.48, which brings it to 5.189, oddly enough. So it brings it back to about 5.1 million in there, which is closer to halfway there, right? Because the expectation is we would want to have at least, excuse me, we said 15, not 10. So 1/3 of the way there, 30%, as opposed to 3%. Okay.
That's what
And excuse me, and remember, you want to build for the future.
Yes.
So therefore, you have to factor in the growth of your annual budget year over year.
Agreed.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it might be 100 million this year. What's it going to be next year? 105, for example, and that's the number that you want to budget towards.
And when right now, I think the 98 million includes our annual expenditures for capital. Would that be included in the calculations? So for example, well, I'll let you answer that question, then I'll follow up on.
Because you're doing it with a pay-go model, It's part of your operating budget.
Okay. And for example, when we were doing the ice arena, and we took 20-something million bucks for that, presumably that 20 million does not count. I'm not looking for a reserve against that, correct?
No, sir, that's on your income side.
Okay.
So it would be the debt service that's associated with that $20 million.
All right, fair. Thank you.
Councilmember, okay. All right. So with that, colleagues, before we close out tonight and going into next week, trying to get a general sense of the room, if we were to move forward with the 20-cent tax rate increase, we could, and then use the savings that we've achieved to go into the unrestricted fund balance, we would get roughly a third of the way there to kind of the minimum we need to be at. Once we reach that 15% minimum, would you say at that point we would be safe to go back to the bond market in the future, or would we need to get to our statutory 25% before we'd be safe?
No, I think what you're going to do, what I recommend doing anyway, is you go out and do private financing this year. You get a chance to build up your fund balance to something a little bit more more significant than where you are today, okay? And then at that, concurrent with all this happening in your new committee, write up policies and write up a plan relative to how you're going to get back to the appropriate levels, okay? The plan is as important as what the actual number is in your, it can't be zero, of course, but if you're at $7 million of fund balance and you have a plan to get to a target of 15%, or 20%, and that's where I would bring Davenport in. What is that magic threshold, that percentage? Once you get that plan, and then you have $7 million in your fund balance, you can articulate in a very good way, and you can even provide them a pro forma statement of these are our expenses, these are our revenues, this is what we're going to do. So they have a picture of how you're going to go from where I am today, where I'm going to be tomorrow, and it's a council-approved, voted-approved strategy. They'll be very happy with that, okay? They may give you a negative outlook. They may, there's no guarantee that they won't downgrade. You won't know if they're going to downgrade until you go there. But everything that you possibly can to set that foundation so that they have confidence. And another thing that they want is to be able to see that you are willing to make the political sacrifice and do what is needed. Okay, so if you raise your hands and say, we're going to do a 20-cent increase, they're going to see that you have the political will to address the financial difficulties that you're going through. A couple years back that you didn't do it, okay, that's water under the bridge, okay, but now that you're taking an aggressive approach and you're doing what you need to do, that's going to bear a lot of fruit with them. Now, if you do 10%, 10 cents, and you're not quite there yet, and you're continuing to have difficulty in formulating a plan, that's when I would throw out the cautionary flag and say, hey, listen, you might want to rethink what your strategy is. But, the overall strategy right now, just make sure that you have that plan and it's voted upon, and then you have the pro forma with it. It'll be well received.
And to Director Miller's point about the percentage against which that fund balance is being measured will also factor in growth in the fund. So it's going to be really critical as we do this kind of accountability and performance work and new funding stream work over the coming months, That's where it's really going to fall on us to make policy choices to limit the extent to which future budgets have to grow, so that we can further protect the fund balance. Any other questions for Director Miller? Councilmember Rogers?
So one part of the plan, I mean, this is something just to consider. One part of this, of our plan, and we've talked about this, is that we can never go another 20 years without increasing taxes. We know that we have to create a regular cadence around tax increase. And so my logic is, as part of our strategy and plan, which you said is very important, just as important as having the money in the reserves. I mean, you have to have a plan. You have to show what your future is.
A plan.
And the will to implement, absolutely. So with that being said, we know we're going to have to create a regular cadence around tax increase. It seems to me that it could be feasible, since we're looking at having almost 30% threshold in our reserve account, that we could technically not hit with the full 20%. And this is where I'm going, because we know we're going to have to come back next year with another tax increase in the following year. I mean, this is all going to be part of our plan. So why can't the citizens benefit as well as the reserve account, even if it's a penny, this year, as we consider moving forward? You can answer it.
I think that's a question for the council, ultimately.
Okay, council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So I'm fine with a 19-cent tax rate increase this year as opposed to 20. I think that's fine. I'm going to speak candidly. I think residents aren't going to give a fig. I think they're going to say, you took me from 20 cents to 19, thanks.
You're tucked away from it. Can you repeat that?
No, I said I don't think residents are going to be impressed, the difference between 20 and 19. To 18. My point is simply this. The situation that I'm really hoping we avoid is one where we have to come back and do this again next year, because the bottom fell out or we ran into a crisis and we're having to potentially raise taxes multiple years in a row. I'm very nervous. I'm very nervous about the global economy. I'm very nervous about federal hiring. I'm very nervous about a lot of stuff, and I'm very nervous about the fact that in all the years that I've done this, residents, the preponderance of residents have said, keep my services the same. That really concerns me. I've said this before, if we built this town's services around what I personally like, we would have 1/5 the staff, 1/4 the tax rate, because I just don't use that much. I think I've called animal control twice because my neighbor's parakeets keep getting out. And then I like the roads, and I like maybe trash pickup once every 3 weeks. But the challenge is our residents really like the services. And, you know, as we grew our police department from $0 to $20 million and 0 officers to 66 officers and 0 staff to 92 total staff, in addition to a dispatch center and command and all that, you know, we essentially gave ourselves a 20% discount, you know, on the cost of that department. You know, we never funded it. And now we've got that department, in addition to all the other services that we have, and we want to keep that department. And most of the residents that I know would love to see us double the size of the police department in the next few years. In the current plan, we hire at most, I think, 6 new cops. So all I'm saying is, if we want to go down to 19 cents, I'm totally fine with that. It will just take a little bit longer to replenish the fund balance. But yeah, I'd be totally fine with that.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, go ahead. You go first.
Councilmember Indy
go
Bumadu.
Sorry, go ahead, at large, Councilmember Rogers. I didn't see your hand.
Well, what I wanted to say was, because we have not planned, we can't sit here and say that we won't increase taxes next year or the year after, because we have no plan in place. And we don't know what inflation looks like. You know, we don't know whether or not, you know, a truck will break down or whatever. So that's one thing that we can't sit here and say that we're not going to have to increase taxes after a 20% hit. We know the 20% hit will help us replenish our reserve account, but until we sit down and look at the plan and look at all the variables that come along with it, the environmental issues, then we can't make that commitment tonight. The other thing is, I heard you talk about the police force. It's my understanding, and I talked to somebody who was on the council some years ago, the way the police department was funded, there was enough money that they had in the beginning of setting it up that lasted over 7 years. So it wasn't like a total 20% hit that was not accounted for. Now, I don't know, Dennis was here, I don't know if you can expand on that or not. So I don't want to put it all on the police force. I mean, it makes it an easy story to tell, but I also know that, we have to be honest with the public, and we have to tell them, all right, until we sit down and map out a plan, we don't know what next year looks like, but we're telling you we're going to work hard so that if we do the 20%, next year we don't want to have to increase taxes. I mean, that's the story that we're telling. So anyway, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Totally heard, Councilmember.
Thanks.
Councilmember Ndebumadu.
Thank you. I definitely hear all of the comments that are being raised by Councilmember Rogers. What I want to say in response to your comments, Mayor Steve, I think what you're precisely the contradiction. We can't say, okay, yeah, we're fine taking it down to 19 cents and that's a trade-off, and then that doesn't materialize anything, when the reality is currently in the budget book, the way that it is structured today, the proposal is for 20 cents this year and another 10 within the next year to 2 years. And so the proposal continues to keep the posture of raising taxes over the next short-term amount of time. And so this is not a raised taxes and it's going to fix everything for us. This is genuinely a structural kind of bypass that we're passing to constituents to sustain operations. But I would even caution us on using the word replenish, because it's not even really replenishing. It's really band-aiding what's actually going on. And I think for me, what becomes so tiresome is that we keep talking about the markets, everybody, inflation, this and that. We are not the first city or municipality or county to encounter financial difficulties and have a comeback. We are not the first. This is a tried and true tale across the United States of America, where there are multiple municipalities that have faced financially hard times, and they have been very intentional and aggressive on their comeback strategy and their plan, and they have made meaningful changes to restructure their environment. And so I would be more enthusiastic about this conversation if this 20% increase was actually addressing a structural problem and it was actually replenishing a general fund rather than sustaining the continuity in operations. And that's really what it's doing. And so I'm not prepared to ask my constituents in District 4 to shoulder a 20-cent burden right now when you keep emphasizing that things are hard for everybody, but then saying, yeah, well, things are hard, but it's okay to still pass the cost on to you, when everybody's passing the cost on to constituents. They're passing the cost on under the guise of consumerism. They're passing the cost under the guise of labor. They're passing the cost under the guise of property tax increases. And so I think that we have to have a plan. I don't know what the next meaningful step is to implement that plan or come to agreement on that plan, but that is something that we need to do very quickly, because I would even be hard-pressed to wonder if staff is walking away from this conversation with an actual takeaway or an actual direction on what they need to be doing between now and Monday, when it is going to be time to vote on this increase. And so what I need to get out of this conversation tonight on behalf of District 4 is, what is the meaningful next step that both we need to take as council members and what staff is prepared to take between now and Monday when we make that vote, instead of sitting here and just trying to push this 20% increase. To Councilmember Brady's point, we have not received, and he didn't make this point, but he asked for this, but I still haven't seen it, so I'm just going to make the point for him. We have not received the breakdown on what does a 15-cent look like, what does a 10-cent look like, what are those different options actually look like. Yes, I'm so glad that we've achieved cost savings. That's great, but structurally, we are not solving the problem, and this needs to become a comeback story as opposed to a continuity of operations where in 2 years or the next year, you're going to come back to me and ask District 4 residents to shoulder the burden. I'm not prepared to do that. Thank you for the time.
So we found, Councilmember Brady.
Thank you. Believe me, Councilwoman Rogers, you didn't put me on the spot with a question about the police department. I was here at the time we started it. I fully supported it. That was a referendum question that was overwhelmingly supported by the voters. They were presented with the startup cost and the expected future costs. And I can also tell you that for the first 5 to 7 years, I recall, much of the startup cost was offset by the tax differential with the county, so the residents of Bowie didn't see an impact on their taxes. Now, after about 7 years, as we started getting more and more officers in, it became more and more costly. That went away. We still get a tax differential for it, but it didn't cover the total cost of the program. So there's a little nuance there for the first startup on that. Yes, we don't have a crystal ball here where we can figure out what the inflation rate's going to be next year or the year after, 10 years from now. You can make assumptions, but you know what to say about making assumptions. But you do the best you can, and I don't see things as dire. I see this as a bump in the road, kind of like a speed bump, and citizens complain about speed bumps when you put them on their street. But I see this as a speed bump for this year, maybe next year, but things tend to turn around. I don't expect, unless the global economists are true, that we're heading to dire global economic disaster. I expect that we will see a turnaround, and we just need to be able to get through this one. And I'm also concerned that with implementing the full 20-cent increase in taxes, there's going to be some in the city who are severely impacted by it, and we haven't done enough. And I don't see 19 cents being necessarily any more palatable to them. So I think we need to share the suffering, share the pain, and I don't see that we're doing that right now. Thank you.
Any of my other colleagues? Okay. So just to be clear, we pretty much need to have an idea of what our tax rate's going to be tonight. If we don't have an idea on what our tax rate's going to be tonight, we're going to need in writing a majority of this council to agree to what operational cuts we're prepared to make or capital cuts we're prepared to make for next year. And that really needs to happen tonight.
Mr. Mayor, can you add a little bit more detail what has to be? You want us to actually go through the exercise again, looking at our, things that we may have looked at that should be cut, or what?
What I will say is this: if we're not prepared to do 20 cents tonight, I would recommend that we take a few minutes as a group, quietly look at our budget books, look at the document in front of us of proposed cuts, and see if there's anything after several moments of study that jump out that folks might want to eliminate, and then we can go from there. One of my colleagues like a few minutes to go through that exercise.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Ndibu Madu.
happy to participate in the exercise, but what about I've heard several different points of data be asked for this evening, and it doesn't sound like we're about to get them back in the next couple of minutes. So what exactly are you hoping to achieve out of this exercise in this moment?
Specific ideas for operational or capital cuts that people are prepared to agree to this evening in order to lower the rate beyond a 20-cent tax rate increase.
Gotcha. Thank you. Where's the budget book?
So, Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember.
I don't think this is probably going to work well. I mean, we can sit here and ponder. I don't think that's going to work well. I did a spreadsheet and I looked at 5, 10, 15% cuts. I saw that 15% was, and I'm looking at expense cuts. I saw that 15% was really too much. 10% was too much. We had barely gotten to 5% before we came in, and we had made some more cuts. So putting those numbers back in today, through a different way of accounting for things, took us back up to a little over 5%. And so 5% is where I was coming from. So I can look at this again all day long, and it probably doesn't help me much at all as far as decision making. And I don't want to waste these good people's times or anybody on the podium's time or the dais time sitting here trying to do something that I don't have any other information to do it on. I mean, that's my reality right now. I don't have anything to do it on, so. So you're gonna have to do a couple things. One, you can always call for a vote, and then the other thing is, if it's not at 18% or 19%, if it's 20%, then so be it. We move forward on it. But right now, I don't have any additional information. Thank you, sir.
No, I totally hear where you're coming from. And believe you me, I understand how difficult this budget cycle has been. Sorry, Councilmember Ndibu Madu.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm like talking to myself and then asking myself questions and forgot I wasn't on mute. Okay, my question was, I didn't mean to interrupt, is the deadline to vote on this actually tonight or is it on May 4th, just so I understand?
Staff, when do you need an answer?
On Thursday, tomorrow, staff will be preparing your agenda packets, which will include the legislation you will be passing on Monday night. So it will either be prepared tomorrow with a number included in it, or it will be prepared without a number that you fill in on Monday night, or it will be prepared with a number tomorrow that you change on Monday night. 3 scenarios.
So what I would,
Is she done?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I would propose is this. Councilmember Brady.
I'm leading along the lines with Councilwoman Rogers. First off, I'm troubled by the suggestion that your colleagues, need to, right now, at this dais, put down in writing where we want to see cuts. I'm troubled by that. Secondly, through this whole process, I think we've not done things in the right sequence. I think it would have been better to say to staff, okay, we want to cut $1 million from this department. Can you do it and give us feedback on the impacts? We want to set a tax rate of 17 cents, increase of 17 cents. How can that be spread across the organization in order to try and maintain services at the level? We know they'll be impacted a little bit. So we have botched the ball with how we've been handling this. So that right now, I think what the obvious thing we should do is ask staff to take all the stuff that we've talked about tonight, and including, I would suggest, the $2 million going to the equipment acquisition fund, and look at how we can massage that and come up with a reasonable level in the reserves and a reasonable impact on the citizens through the new tax rate. I don't think we're going to accomplish this. I totally agree with Councilwoman Rogers' assessment of this exercise tonight. I think it's an exercise in futility because we don't have the proper information or, more importantly, the time to go through it tonight in the next half hour or so. So, and we can have the document, leave it blank, and we'll make the decision on Monday night when we have more information from staff.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Truesdale.
Thank you. I agree with my colleagues. I'm not prepared to make any cuts without evaluating the data to make the best decision. So I concur with my colleagues. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Ndebumadu.
Thank you, Mayor Steve. I'm just going to concur with Councilmember Brady, not in a position to make that decision tonight. I do concur with the methodology that has been placed on the table by Councilmember Brady. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Wolfley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate it. First of all, I do want to chime in on the one comment or the suggestion on the taking the $2 million in the reserve, not funding the reserve fund for the equipment acquisition replacement fund. I don't think that's a good idea. I think that's digging a hole in the equipment acquisition replacement fund to fill a hole over in the general fund, which I think is you just have two holes. We will then have to recoup that. We have to refill that at some point as well, which means that we would have that burden next year to come up with a couple $1 million to backfill what we took out this year. And I don't see anything that's would suggest that next year is going to be any easier to fund last year's expenses, and they'll have enough time, enough difficulty year to year without having to make up for lost monies there. So I don't think that's a good idea. I think that just starts a second hole for us to have to recover from. I do think that collectively we've done a good job of taking staff recommendations and going through and finding $3.8 million in savings that we've collectively agreed upon. Some will say that there could have been more. Others would say that there were too many. But I do think that collectively there's 3.8. I also am firmly believe that there's more to be had out there. And I think earlier we all agreed that we are going to make that effort in the coming fiscal year to pursue additional budget cuts as well as savings on expenses, looking at staffing, looking at everything, as well as potential additional revenue sources to generate additional savings. And we've all said that we can't do this all in one couple of days or a couple of weeks during a budget cycle, but that we could, over the course of the coming fiscal year, make some additional cuts. I think that's our path forward. That's our plan. That's our goal. I think we need a number for it, and that number equates to what amounts to a tax cut for the following year. If you can save $5 million, if you can find savings of $5 million, then the next year you can drop 5 cents on the tax rate. assuming all things are equal, recognize that they're not always equal. There's always going to be some surprise that comes up. Maybe it's 4%, maybe it's 6%, but at least you have a direction in which we're going, which is targeting reduction of costs and increasing in alternative sources. I think that is the plan. And then the question is, if that's the plan, because I think it's the only option. I mean, I don't think anybody here is going to go through and pencil out, another $16 million in savings without eviscerating staff or, 2/3 of our services to a level that constituents would be completely unsatisfied. And I'm not talking about, marginals. I mean, those are huge cuts. So I do think that we do have a plan. I do think we have to come to closure on what that means, whether it's 20 cents or 18 or 19 or whatever. I don't think you can get anything below, 18's I think kind of close, but 19. We got to come up with a balance. The budget has to get passed, and we have to have the revenue. So I think we've done better than we give ourselves credit for, and I think we keep failing to look at what the commitment is to make additional. And I think that's what has to happen. And we talk about we've not seen that, but yet that's our only option. And so I think we have to accept that we are going to do that and act on that, and then make that the stated plan going forward, so that we do actually have an opportunity to meet our constituent services. And I do also, there's been some discussion about a comment that I heard made during the listening session, which is, if the city is going to do this, we have to meet the citizens halfway. That's wrong. It's 100% for the citizens. Anything we collect from the citizens is for the citizens. If we collect less, then we're going to give less to the citizens. So it's not like I'm giving and taking like there's some, there's some zero-sum game. This is all about how we best meet the requirements of the citizens. And I've heard from time and time again that they want their Cadillac services. They want their differentiator for being in Bowie. And they're in Bowie for a reason. And nobody likes the 20-cent increase. Certainly I do not. And I'm fully dedicated to finding additional cost savings over the coming year. And in addition to that, I'm glad that we made the cuts so far that we found, and I'm sure there will be more. So thank you.
Any additional thoughts? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know where we want to go from here.
Staff, what happens if we come to you on Monday night with a number then for the tax rate? Walk me through the consequences if you don't have clarity until Monday, sometime during our meeting after 7 o'clock.
So the consequences you have is you will have provided no notice to your community about what you intend to do. So the public will not have an opportunity when the agenda comes out to see what your proposed legislation is, so they will have no opportunity to comment on it when we have the public comment. You have the ability, once legislation is proposed, you can amend that from the floor. You have that ability to do that. So you have the ability to amend that number on Monday. It would probably be good to have something to put out to the public, even if you consult and come up with a different opinion after discussions on Monday.
Councilmember Brady.
Thank you. In light of that comment, not that we are proposing or adopting, I would recommend in order to inform the public of our possible action Monday night, that you include the tax rate that is proposed in the current budget and let us act on it Monday night accordingly.
I hear a second to that proposal.
Wait, hold on, sorry, can I ask a clarifying question?
Councilmember Ndibu Madu.
So to Councilmember Brady, does that mean your original proposal is now no longer on the table? I just want to make sure I understand this correctly.
No, I'm not weighing in on the proposal. All I'm saying is for the ability for staff to generate the document so the public can see, I'm just saying put a placeholder that is the recommended 20-cent tax increase that is in the budget. Not that I'm willing to accept that, but just to have that as a reference point for the public going into Monday night's meeting.
Okay, and if I may add an adjustment to the proposal that's on the table, or the proposal. Councilmember Brady also, right before this part of the discussion, laid out a methodology or a framework of how we could move forward in terms of the additional data that we are requesting from staff. So can we couple this new ask with that previous ask?
Well, I wasn't going to step back from the requested information. I was looking at that as informing us for Monday night's meeting to finalize the number that will be in the document that the county needs to establish the tax rate for the city.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that's clear for staff as well, because it wasn't fully clear for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Brady. Just so staff's clear, are you clear on what additional information council is asking for?
No.
All right, great. So for those who've said they've requested additional information, let's take a minute and make sure that we are explicitly clear with staff what we're asking for. Councilmember Ndibu Madu.
You're asking me, am I clear?
Are you making additional information requests of staff going into Monday's meeting?
I'm sorry, I thought Councilmember Brady already laid that out. Do you need him to repeat?
I think there were several council members with ask. I'll go back to Councilmember Brady.
So I think I would couple all of those asks and say that those are all asks that we all have. Can that be provided by Monday?
Staff doesn't know what we're asking. Councilmember Brady.
Well, I think what my colleagues are, excuse me, what they're referring to is the request that I made several weeks ago on what would be the impact if we did not adopt the 20-cent tax increase, but did 15, did 10, did 5, did 0, in order to figure out where the soft spot would be, you might say, or the optimum point on the curve, to figure out what would be the best trade-off between increase in taxes and tweaking back services. That I think is what they're referring to, but I'm not certain to what detail can be provided this late in the game, although I think we ought to ask some clarifying questions. We've thrown out a lot of things, numbers with regards to savings and this and what have you. And so I need clarity with regards to what we could save. You know, we've got the issue with regards to going and borrowing to transfer some things from the capital program over. Well, what's the actual value of that? You know, the only number we've got right now is the cable and the LEDs, but we're talking about moving others. So that'll impact the budget. So we have some uncertainty with regards to the numbers. So we just need a little more clarity on what we decided to do tonight, and possibly additional information if there are some tweakings that staff can do between now and Monday with regards to services and programs and projects.
Staff, is that clear to you?
The direction that we have is to provide the additional value of adding more of our capital into the debt that we are considering issuing.
Was there anything else?
And then, Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Ndibu Madu.
that was correct of the first ask. The second part that I didn't hear was the exact ask that he just made. So we've said a number of different times throughout this conversation, the implication of adopting 10% increase versus 15 versus 20. So I just want to make sure that's being captured, because it's been said a couple of times.
Staff, how would you respond to the request of providing us with a budget that has a 5% tax increase, a 10% tax increase, and a 15% tax increase?
We would need to know where you would like that to come from. On Monday night, without much guidance, we provided a variety of different things for the council to discuss. At the end of that discussion, probably 40% of the things that the staff had proposed were not accepted by the council. I don't think we have clarity in regards to where the council would want that to come from. There is so much choice here. We would be bringing to you a list, much like we did on Monday night, of a whole host of other things that are spread out across the budget for us to have another several-hour conversation about.
Councilmember Ndibumadu, any thoughts?
I would love to hear more about more thoughts from Councilmember Brady on this particular response as he originally proposed it. So I would love to hear his thoughts.
Councilmember Brady.
Yes, I wish we had gotten that information, but clearly we lack some clarity in the direction. And with regards to the question that you asked, where, any cuts, if we were to sit here and say, we need you to save $1 million between now and Monday, it's across the board qualified. Across the board, with the exception of Public Works and the police department. Can that be attained? What about $5 million? Can it be attained? So that's the kind of analysis or look back that I was hoping over the last couple of weeks, so that we can make an informed decision. I appreciate what we did Monday night, but it was more line by line, different programs or different parts of different departments, rather than can we look at the overall organizational structure and see, can we shift some things around in order to achieve savings?
So the challenge with this from the staff perspective is you are asking staff to be making a value judgment in regards to the services that are offered. I think we saw on Monday night there was not alignment in regards to what the staff perceived that the council might want to do versus what the council wants to do. Right. I think it would be difficult for us to put something together to forestall what your judgment is in regards to what services or other costs that the community would find acceptable. I think this falls directly in the realm of the council's responsibility for identifying what categories of things you are interested in making changes to on behalf of the community.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Brady. Councilmember Rogers.
So I want to make this real simple. So what I did, I took all your summary of expenditures, and I just took the proposed for 2026, 2027, and I went down through all of them, which was general government, economic. I took each line item and I put it in a spreadsheet. And in that spreadsheet, I took, for example, city council. That was the first line item, which was $567,500. And what I did in my next column, I did a 5% cut, then a 10% cut, and a 15% cut. That gave me a relative idea of what those cuts look like, so that when you presented on Monday night, I could tell you that what you had proposed was probably a bit less than my 5% cut. So I did that with the expenditures, and then with revenue, I did the same thing, but I wanted to see how much more could we get in revenue for certain things. It's not going to be applicable to everything, but what I was trying to figure out is how much, if I got 5% more revenue that came in next fiscal year, what would it look like? If I got 10%, and it's just a very simple way of just kind of giving me some idea of what this looked like and what the impacts would be. So just by me doing those simple things, I was able to see that a 15% cut across the board for the city would be too much. It would just be way out of sync. The 10% was too much. When I went down to the 5%, and then when I saw you present, then I was like, okay, I'm in the range. So that helps us kind of gauge, what it looks like. Because in my simple mind, I'm thinking that if I can increase revenue at some point, maybe it's 3 to 5%, and if I can cut my expenditures by some number, 3 to 5%, then maybe as we plan for the future, my gap won't be as huge, and I start closing up the gap on out years. So I just started with this fiscal year and just tried to make it very simple, that's all.
Oh, okay, so what you were relaying was just identifying the dollar amount of the cut, but not necessarily where that would come from.
Well, I think that's too much work at this point.
Folks, I'm going to take the mic here. We are the council. We make policy decisions. They don't make policy decisions. We make policy decisions. So I'm going to say this. I think Councilman Brady is right. I think proposing the 20-cent rate in our discussion Monday is a good start. If my colleagues, looking through their budget book, identify additional operational or capital cuts that they'd like to entertain on Monday, and that we as a council, a majority of us agree to on Monday, we can make those cuts, and we can thereby make some decisions from there, whether or not those funds go into the unreserved fund balance, or whether we use those funds to lower our tax rate a little bit further. I think that's a great exercise. Or a combination of the two, as Councilmember Brady says. So I'm very prepared to move forward with Councilmember Brady's suggestion, but it's ultimately going to be on us to identify those things we're prepared to eliminate. Because if we simply say, staff, find $5 million, they may come back to us on Monday with half of a police department, or our entire community services department closed. And Monday is not going to be the night to have that fight, right? So what I would say to my colleagues is let's identify some additional things we're prepared to trim from our budgets. We have our books, and otherwise I agree with Councilman Brady to proceed Monday with the advertised rate, and we can negotiate from there. Does that sound okay to my
Mr. Mayor,
colleagues? Councilmember Ndikumadu.
I'm just going to make one comment on behalf of District 4. I'm in alignment with Councilmember Brady's suggestions and recommendations in regards to a combination of both. Where I'm going to respectfully push back and disagree is, yes, it is council makes policy decisions when there are policy decisions to be made, but expecting council members to go through a book of this density and this length and understand the implications of the inner workings of what is being recommended to cut is not a data-driven, informed decision. It's just not. You can't expect me to go into Public Works, and if I tell you, okay, cut this one program that's $2 million, to understand how that affects the inner workings of Public Works, because I'm not a Public Works professional. So while I hear what you're saying and I hear where you're trying to go, it is not a realistic exercise in that sense, because at the end of the day, staff is in it in a way that we never will be. We are not full-time city employees, and we don't see the inner workings of every department. So while I'm happy to participate in the exercise, I'm just going to push back on you because they know the inner workings of this city better than we ever will. So I'll make the recommendations necessary, but I also have the same expectation of those recommendations from staff at a higher rate that aligns with Councilmember Brady's suggestions that help me as a legislator make data-driven, informed decisions on the policy to set. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. Any other thoughts?
Just one quick summary comment. It's very brief.
No, take your time. You're all good. Councilmember Brady.
I think our discussion tonight, especially how we're ending it tonight, gives us the first item to tackle when we have the subcommittee of the whole looking at the budget.
Agreed. Councilmember Rogers has the spreadsheet. All right. Staff, anything else from us?
We will prepare your documents for your consideration on Monday.
Wonderful. Colleagues, I'm sure we'll be talking one-on-one over the next few days. In the meantime, have a pleasant weekend. For those who are traveling, please travel safe. For those who are celebrating birthdays or relatives' birthdays, please enjoy. And I will talk everyone on Monday, 7 o'clock.